Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Edges. Some of you know me, but many of you do not. My name is Daryl, and I've actually been around here for quite a while, since the beginning of Edges, actually. I'm one of the founding pastors here. And so a few years back, I decided I wanted to take on a new vocation, and I began a career working in student affairs at Virginia Tech. And though I stopped serving as a pastor here in 2016, my heart has remained here at Edges. And most Sundays, you'll find me sneaking in the back just a little bit late, usually with my two kids and my wife. And we come late mostly because I just like to sneak in without being noticed, but I was going to make a joke here about my wife always making us late, but she's here, so I won't do that, even though I probably just threw myself under the bus anyway. But my family, we keep coming to Edges because you are our people, our community. We have fostered and created our best friendships here. We have found and continue to find grace, acceptance, and support here in this place. We constantly feel God's overwhelming, outrageous, never giving up, all-encompassing love here at Edges. And those are just a few reasons that we keep coming back. So a few weeks ago, Kelly wrote me an email, and she began her email with the following words, and I quote, "Good morning, my favorite friend from the beginning." So I knew immediately she was buttering me up for a favor, because those are definitely the nicest things she's ever said about me or to me. So I knew something was up. And so sure enough, in the next paragraph, she began to ask me if I would be a part of this new sermon series that we have going on right now called Rewind, where we're revisiting some of the sermons that we preached a few years back. And she asked me if I would rework a sermon from 2015 and give it. But to keep her in suspense and to make her worry, I told her I would think about it. But secretly, I had been hoping for a long time that she would be asking me to preach again here in this community. But if you know anything about the way Kelly and I work together, you know I could never let on and let her know that I was just chomping at the bit to be back here. And so I told her a couple days later that I would be able to work her into my busy schedule. And now here we are. And so if you were here last week, Kelly pumped me up to be like a good preacher. And she even said I was the better dresser of the two. One of those statements is true, so be prepared to be significantly underwhelmed. But before we begin, would you pray with me? God, we show up this morning carrying all kinds of baggage, all kinds of anxieties and stress that are so difficult to let go. God, in these next few moments, allow us to be surrounded by your presence and be reminded that you are here. Allow us to put our focus on you and whatever it is that you will tell us today. Amen. There's a word derived from a Hebrew word found throughout the Jewish scriptures that I wish we would pay more attention to. That word is Sabbath. Some of you have heard this word before. Others may not be familiar with it. The word Sabbath is first alluded to in the Bible in the book of Genesis. In Genesis 2, verse 1, the creation poem reaches its conclusion. And this is what is written. The heavens and the earth and all who live in them were completed. On the sixth day, God completed all the work that he had done. And on the seventh day, God rested from all the work that he had done. God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from the work of creation. God had been working, creating all that would be on earth and in the heavens for 6 days in this part of the creation narrative. But on the seventh day, God stopped. God took some time to rest and reflect on the beauty of the creation. The creation was such an amazing thing. God needed to just enjoy what God had done. It's quite a beautiful thing, right? God enjoys creation. And so maybe you know this feeling. Maybe you've just cooked a gourmet dinner. You've set the table with your best china and the finest linens that you own. You set the freshly prepared meal at its place at the table, and for a moment, you just stare and take in the perfection of what you have just created. And you have this minute or two before your family comes in to devour this dinner. And you take those couple of minutes and relax and take pride in all that you have made. Or maybe it's that time you worked tirelessly on that landscaping project in your front yard. You've meticulously planned out each and every detail, from the retaining wall and what it will look like to where each flower and shrub will be positioned. And when the time comes, you kill the grass and you begin pulling every weed in the area where your new raised flower bed will be. Weekend after weekend, you work. Your hands are dirty and calloused. You've lost hours and hours of free time, but when it's finally finished, you take a step back. And with satisfaction, you say, wow, I actually did that. Wow is right. This is what God said at the end of the sixth day. And then God chose to rest. The word Sabbath, as we know it, comes from the Hebrew word Shabbat. Shabbat, as a verb, simply means to cease or to stop. Shabbat, as a noun, means the day that stops. It's implying that all work and normal activity should cease. God stopped, and then God says, this day will be respected, it will be holy, it will be sacred. Shabbat, according to the Jewish culture, was a day of rest. It was, and even is today, observed from sundown on Friday until 3 stars appear in the sky Saturday evening, approximately 40 minutes after sunset. In the Jewish culture, the observation of a weekly Shabbat would be marked with 3 festive meals, with prayer, and with rest. Sabbath was extremely important in the Jewish culture, and in the book of Exodus, we find out why. So if you've got a Bible with you this morning, or if you just want to grab one that's on your table, we're going to look in the book of Exodus. It's the second book of the Bible, and if you want to follow along on one of those Bibles on your table, it can be found on page 42. But if not, you can just follow along on the screen as I read it aloud. So here is what Exodus chapter 20, verse 8 says. Remember the Sabbath day and treat it as holy. 6 days you may work and do all your tasks, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. Do not do any work on it, not you, your sons or daughters, your male or female servants, your animals, or the immigrant who is living with you. Because the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and everything that is in them in 6 days, but rested on the seventh day. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. These words might be familiar. They're a part of a set of rules given to the prophet Moses to share with the Israelite people. These laws were important, and they were given to help everyone understand the greatest of all the commandments: love God and love others. The commandments were all about relationships. The first 4 of these commandments address humanity's relationship with God. And the 6 remaining address humanity's relationship with one another. Keeping the Sabbath day holy is the 4th commandment. It is the final commandment concerning our relationship with God. Now, there are some specific rules to go along with this important commandment. First, don't do any work, like we've established that, right? But the second part says not only are we to rest and not do any work, but we are also required to make it so no one else does work for us as well. You can't work. Your children can't work. Your servants aren't allowed to work. Your guests from out of town are not allowed to work. And even your animals are given the day off. That word work, as we use it, is very general. Something I might consider work, you may or may not consider work. And so there's this Hebrew word that they came up with. The word is melechat. I always love to say it with a CH in Hebrew, melechat. Can you say that with me? 1, 2, 3. Melechat. And it didn't feel good to get a little phlegm in there. But this Hebrew word, it means deliberate activity, usually related to some kind of craftsmanship or skill. And there came this list of 39 melechat that were prohibited on the Sabbath. Things like plowing, baking, washing, hammering, weaving, building, demolishing, writing 2 or more letters, erasing 2 or more letters, starting a fire. All of these things prohibited on the Sabbath. And these strict rules, they couldn't be broken except for one reason: to save a life. In fact, according to Jewish law, it is required to break the Sabbath to help someone in need of saving. So in a few words, the Sabbath was a pretty big deal for the early Jewish people. And it still is for many today. Not all of them take them so literally and to the extreme, but many follow them to an extent. But why is this such a big deal? If you can, for just a minute, put yourself in the shoes of an Old Testament Israelite. You, your parents, your grandparents, and so on have been enslaved in Egypt. For over 200 years, the Jewish people have been trapped as slaves in Egypt for Pharaoh. Day after day, the Jewish people were given the same jobs: make bricks and construct a new supply buildings for offering sacrifices to the Egyptian gods. So it was like this double-edged sword: work as slaves, obviously that stinks, but also build things that would serve gods that you did not worship. So life in Egypt was the same thing every day: make bricks, build buildings, eat, sleep, repeat. Tomorrow is the same, and the day after that is the same. So when God rescues the Jewish people from slavery, God gives the people this list of commands, and one of the most important commands is to cease, to stop. A day without bricks, a day without construction, a day to rest. But it was not just God rescuing God's people from physical work, but also rescuing them from the cycle of attachment. After being rescued, the Jewish people realized that freedom was kind of hard. In Egypt, they knew what they were going to do each and every day. But with this new freedom, they were seeking some direction. At one point, they say, things were a lot easier back in Egypt. Maybe we should go back. And so God was trying to remind God's people that their purpose is not to work. But their purpose is also to take a break, to pause, to refresh, relax, rest. You see, Sabbath is, of course, about our relationship with God, but it's also about our relationships with ourselves, with our family, with our friends, our community. What would a day without work, a day of rest, look like for you? Do you think that's something that's even possible? If the answer in your head right now is, probably not, why is that? Seriously, why can't we do that? I mean, it's easy to say, well, I don't have enough time. Or there's just too much to be done and not enough days in the week to get it all complete. Or I don't want people to think I'm lazy. So is that to say that our brothers and sisters from the Jewish faith are not busy, or don't have enough time, or that they are lazy? I don't think so. Interesting fact, in the first century, Greeks often called the Jews lazy because of their weekly vacation. But they weren't lazy. In fact, they had to work harder during the week so they could be fully prepared to rest. The observance of the Sabbath is one of the most beautiful traditions of our Jewish brothers and sisters that many in the Christian traditions have seemed to lose. And we're missing out on so much when we refuse to take time out of our week to cease, to stop, to rest. So one of the things that we miss out on is we could be taking some time to gain or improve our relationship with God. Sabbath is not just about taking time away from work, but it's also taking on time with God. It means finding some time to pray, to meditate, to listen. A time where we can look at scriptures, to study them, to talk about them with family, with friends, with our pastor. It's time where we can just sit and contemplate in which the ways that God has been working in our lives. It's an opportunity to write in a journal and see the ways in which God has worked through and in us over time. It's not just good for our souls, but it's also good for our bodies. Providing rest for our physical and mental health is extremely important. Our bodies work so hard throughout the week, getting us from point A to point B, keeping up with classes, with work, with kids. Our bodies become tired so quickly. The more we rest our bodies, the more likely we are to live a longer, healthier life. Stress and mental fatigue can literally kill us. Stress can kill the cells that make up our bodies. And the body heals itself by producing new cells. And our body does most of this reproduction of cells while we sleep, while we rest. Each of us needs times of rest so our body can rejuvenate itself. But if we are unable to let go, to relax, it becomes harder to rest and let our body do its work. So with all these benefits, why would we want to miss out on that? In the Gospel of Mark, Jesus says that the Sabbath was made for us. It was made for you. You need rest. You need to stop every once in a while, because I promise you that the work you have to complete is still going to be there waiting for you Monday morning. Now, this isn't about being legalistic or just following a bunch of rules. This is actually a calling for us to remember that the whole purpose of Shabbat, of Sabbath, is to cease our work, to rest, to become re-energized, and remember that you were created a beautiful creation of God. To the early Jews who lived in slavery in Egypt, it was a reminder that you are no longer under the rule of a harsh master. You are no longer a slave. You no longer have to work until your body gives way. You are free. So, my friends, you are free. You don't have to work under the illusion that you are a slave to your work, a harsh master. You are no longer a slave to your computer, to your cell phone, to your to-do list. Those things will be here tomorrow. We have the freedom to choose rest. And maybe it's not just one day of rest, but maybe it's a couple of hours each day to let go. However you can take it, you should really consider God's great gift of rest. God offers it to each of us, but it's up to us to take it. But I know the reality. Many of us, we're just not going to do it. It's not part of our Western American culture. We feel guilty for taking some me time or some family time, a mental health day. We feel lazy when we're not working our tails off at work or studying. But the gift of Sabbath is for you to enjoy. It's not to be a burden. Rest should never be a burden. It should be something to enjoy. One of my favorite authors and theologians is a guy named Rob Bell. He wrote a book over 10 years ago that was a catalyst for helping me reconsider the ways that I think about God. And he writes about Sabbath and the way that he spends his Saturdays, the day of week that he marks off as his day of rest. And this is what he says. Sabbath is taking a day a week to remind myself that I did not make the world and that it will continue to exist without my efforts. A day when my work is done, even if it isn't. A day when my job is to enjoy, period. A day when I'm fully available to myself and those I love most. A day when I remember that when God made the world, He saw that it was good. A day when I produce nothing. A day when at the end I say, I didn't do anything today, and I don't add, and I feel so guilty. A day when my phone is turned off, I don't check my email, and you can't get a hold of me. pretty powerful. For so long, I thought Sabbath as just being a day of the week. But that's not it. Sabbath is a time of healing. Healing our minds, bodies, and soul. It's about letting go of the things that hold us in their grasp. It's about being free from the things that dictate our lives. Sometimes it's a Saturday, other times it's a Sunday, while other times it's a week of vacation. It's a time of rest and healing. It's a time of being with the ones we love and with the God who loves us more than anything. So I asked this question a little earlier, and one of the things we do here at Edges is we like to talk to each other. We call it a conversation because we're in community together, and we like to talk about things. So for about 2 or 3 minutes, I'd like you all to gather with some folks around your table, and I would invite you to consider these questions that I asked earlier. What would the perfect Sabbath look like for you? And do you think it's actually possible? Why or why not? So grab a few people, introduce yourselves, take a couple minutes, and I'll bring us back and we'll finish up. So spend some time working on these questions. All right, everyone, let's kind of bring it back together. This is always the hardest part of the day. Hopefully you've had a few minutes to talk about some ways that you feel that you can spend your Sabbath. And hopefully you've learned something from someone else on how to spend your Sabbath. So to finish this morning, I just want to share an experience I had a few weeks ago. I had this opportunity to go to a conference in Denver for a few days. And after the conference, I spent 3 days with some of my dearest friends in the world. And they used to live in Blacksburg, but they moved to Colorado Springs a few years ago. And when they asked me what I wanted to do when I came out to visit them after the conference, they were like, we can go to all these places, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I just want to hike. I just want to hike. I just want to be in the mountains. I just want to hike. And so that's what we did. So 2 weeks ago, my buddy Aaron and I, we went on this hike, a hike that he had never been on before, so it was going to be a grand mystery for the both of us. And the hike was to the top of Mount Caneo, which is in the Cheyenne Mountain State Park. The hike was like one of the most difficult things ever because I was not used to the altitude. It was going up 2,000 feet in elevation in less than 3 miles. And then we got to the top, and I was 9,500 feet up in the air, just crazy. We don't have that here, right? And as you can see from this picture, it was worth it. From that rock outcropping, we could see Colorado Springs below. NORAD was to our right, so you could see all the antennas and stuff from, if we ever get bombed or whatever, they're watching over us. So that was peaceful to know that we have that. And then over to our left was Pikes Peak, which is just stunning. It just stands up over everything there. And as we sat up on the top by ourselves, I took a minute and I FaceTimed my wife, because I had a cell phone signal up there, which was exciting. We ate a few Cliff Bars. We talked. And then, just without saying anything, we just gave each other space, and we just sat in silence. I would listen to the wind blow through the valley below. I felt the warm sun on my face. And I didn't even glance at my phone. And neither of us said a word. It was like a mini Sabbath lasting about 45 minutes.